Hey, just out of curiosity, how many students are we expecting to attend this time? Was there like a registration form sent out or anything so we can know when to get started? Okay, awesome. Yeah, then we'll just wait for around that many students. Everyone, thanks for joining. If you saw my message, I just dropped the slides in the chat if you want to just open that up. We have a lot of links to share with you guys, so just looking at the slides might be easier to follow along with. We're gonna wait about like one more minute just so the last minute stragglers will come in. Where's everyone coming from right now? I'm on the East Coast. I'm currently in New Jersey, but I'm based out of the New York office right now. But is anyone like in a different country or just different coast? Oh, Canada, cool. Oh, New Jersey, nice. Lots of New Jerseyans. Australia, okay, that's very, very far. Okay, very cool. I think that's the furthest I've actually seen out. So, how is the, oh, New Jersey too? Okay, lots of New Jerseyans. Hello. That time zone must be killer for Australia, though. All right, cool. So, a lot of you are close. Waterloo, nice. Oh, okay, 10 a.m. Not bad, not bad. All right, so we can start. We'll start a little slow, so if anyone's coming in, they can hopefully refresh. But thank you all for joining. I know this is before your planned hackathon. Thank you all for coming out and checking out what we have to show you. I have a slide deck prepared for all of you. I'm going to drop it in the chat again if you want to follow along. I'm going to start by sharing my screen, and then we can get started. All right. Just to start off, thank you all for joining again. My name is Lillian Nose. I'm a developer advocate on the student programs team at Postman. What that means to say is that that's a ton of words to explain that I work with students across the world, and I get to do exactly what I'm doing now, which is presenting at hackathons, promoting API literacy, and really just helping students learn about APIs. So throughout this workshop, you're going to see a couple of QR codes. They are all the same QR code. This is leading to our API certification. So if you're curious about that, if you want to learn more about APIs, always feel free to scan that. And if you need the link, I'll also drop it in the chat. But a little bit about me. I am a new graduate. I actually graduated about a year and a half ago. From the University of Maryland. I went on to work at Google, Goldman Sachs, and here I am at Postman. So I've been doing a lot of developer advocate work. If you aren't familiar with what developer advocates do, it's a big mix of technology and education. So I love working with people, students especially, and this is really where I get to work with students hands-on and create content that's really great for technical use. So I definitely want to educate you a little bit more about what I do on my team and what our team provides. So I'm going to teach you a little bit about Postman, what even is Postman, and then what our team does to help students. And then we're going to dive into a little bit of what is an API, behind the scenes of what a request and a response is like, so that when you start making your own API calls, you can actually read and understand the language. And then we're going to try things out. So we're going to give you the chance to actually make your own requests in Postman. And then we have a swag challenge. I think the swag challenge is actually switched to the next thing. But before we get into all of that, I want to kind of do like a vibe check, if you will. I set up a little poll. I want to see, this changes from every hackathon workshop that I do. But I'm always curious to see how familiar are you with APIs? Am I working with, are all of you beginners with it? Are you more familiar with it? It's always really interesting to see what kind of scale we're on right now. All right, so I'm seeing a varied response. All right, so I'll give you a couple more seconds to answer, but it's looking all across the board right now. All right, awesome. All right, so we're seeing a varied response. So some of you are a little bit more familiar with APIs, which is great. This is really awesome. I forgot to ask, what year in school are you all? Like, are we still high school students? Are we university students? I would love to see the spread of that too. I'm always just really curious about these students nowadays are getting really, really advanced earlier on. So I've even had a middle schooler attend one of my workshops. So I was like, that was crazy, but all right. So I'm seeing a majority of twos, which is totally normal. And we're going to talk about how common this is. And it's pretty awesome that all of you are actually, two of you actually know what Postman is, you use it. That's really awesome. But for the most part, all of you are around 0 to 2 scale, and that's totally, totally fine. I ask this question a lot at all the hackathons I have, and university student, awesome. So yeah, this gets a really wide range of answers, and I am so okay with none of you guys knowing about Postman or APIs. That makes my job more fun because I get to introduce everything to you for the first time. And even if you are familiar with APIs and you work with them a lot, hopefully you can leave this workshop knowing and feeling confident about working with APIs easier with Postman. So that's to say, we're going to talk about all of this. It's totally fine if you know nothing. Honestly, coming here and getting a kickstart on your career education is really important because, and I'll explain that later too, but APIs are the building blocks of software engineering, and we at Postman really strive to make that gap between your theory work in school and practical industry work to be really easy and seamless. With that all being said, let's go into the fun stuff. There's a swag challenge at the beginning. This is just sharing your learnings on Postman Student or on either LinkedIn or Twitter with the hashtag Postman Student. And you can email this to me. You have the slide deck just in case you need a reminder. You have a whole week to do this. And right now, actually, we're having a giveaway on Postman's official LinkedIn and Twitter. So this is, you'll actually get a little kit, like a little box full of swag. That's our winter giveaway. But yeah, that is the swag challenge. All right, so I promised you I would tell you a little bit about, oh, cool. So this is a widespread, actually. I'm just looking at chat, high school and some undergrads. Awesome. All right, so let me just talk about Postman and what we do here. As I mentioned, a lot of you might have heard what APIs are, but maybe aren't super familiar with it. And that's totally fine. A lot of beginners, what they start to do is they start with Kaggle, they make static sites, and that's totally fine. That's a great starting point. Working with APIs really opens up you to the world of real life data and really live dynamic data. This is what we use in everyday life in software engineering, and this is really a great practical step to learn earlier on in your career. What we at Postman want to do is that we want to make that as easy as possible, and it can be easy. If you haven't heard what Postman does, we are the leading platform, API platform for companies all over. You'll see this number is 98% of Fortune 500 organizations using Postman. All of these companies you see listed here are using it currently. And some of them are completely not tech sounding at all. Like if you think of Kroger, you think of Walt Disney, Capital One, so Uber, yeah. These are all using Postman currently as their day-to-day testing of endpoints. And we actually reached, I need to update this figure, but we actually reached over 25 million developers using Postman. So we have huge companies, huge organizations using Postman. Then we also have smaller startups, smaller individual developers, people who are just coding for fun using Postman. Right now, it is more of the norm. And even if you aren't set on using Postman, and if you want to use an alternative, that's fine. If a company that you work for usually uses a different thing, it's going to have the same features as Postman, so learning about one is pretty much learning the other. So it's really great to just get accustomed to how you test endpoints now. And a little bit about our programs, just to shout them out really quickly. What we do on our team is threefold. We have 3 different programs that we're responsible for. The first one is more relevant to you, which is the Student Expert Program. We want to really enable our students to succeed, and we have a free certification for API fundamentals there. Our whole goal is to really make sure that students can come in knowing nothing, take the course self-paced, free, and really leave this course feeling confident using any API, learning how to use the authorization, and then building their own projects with it. We then are starting to build our own courses. We have one course open right now, which is your first full stack application using Postman and Node.js, and you're going to be making an AI text summarizer app. And I'll show you a demo of that too. The Student Leader Program, if you're looking for leadership roles, we have that available as well. This is the step after you become a student expert and you finish the certification. You can always feel free to apply, and there's exclusive benefits for this. All right, so let's finally get into what is an API. An API, in short, which is in long form, it is application programming interfaces, which isn't super intuitive, but the way I like to think about it is like a menu of options. You can also think of it as a contract that enables code to talk to code. And the most notable thing that APIs really allow for is to open up businesses and companies to open up their code base to external developers. So this really helps for faster innovation, opening up product features. If you've ever seen a Discord bot or a Slack bot, or I'm blanking on some other ones. If you've ever seen someone make a Spotify application, or just anything that includes some businesses' data that you can't necessarily pull from directly because you don't work there, they're usually using an API. There are some companies now who are building their business model off of their own APIs that they build. So this is a really huge thing. Some other ways that people use APIs is to communicate with other services. So this can mean automation and integration as well. All right, so for the people that have worked with APIs, what have you used before? Like I know there's a couple popular ones, and for the people that haven't, are there any APIs that you think you can think of now that you probably use on a daily basis? Fortnite Stats API, that's a new one. I haven't heard of that one. Wait, that's actually pretty cool. So you log into your account and you can probably see your own then? That's awesome. Any other ones? OpenAI, I was waiting for that one. Everyone always mentions that one. That one is a really cool one. If anyone's interested in the whole AI space, there is actually a really great resource called Hugging Face. That is like a completely free open source. It has tons of data models. It does pretty much what OpenAI does. It has text to image. It's completely free, by the way, open source, and it's a really great resource if anyone's interested in using that for a project. I'll show you that one too. Yes, but some other ones that are really popular are like the Spotify one, Google, Twitter, Reddit, Discord, obviously, Slack. Yeah, there's a ton. There's so many. I can't even name them all. And yeah, there really is an API for almost everything. Twilio, if you've heard of it, it does standard messaging services. There's weather APIs of every kind. Stripe does payments. That's a really popular unicorn. Discord, Slack, SendGrid does emails, Spotify, Twitter. And actually, if you're ever curious, or if you generally just are really stuck on a project and you want to build something, I would recommend you go to this GitHub page. I think it's well monitored. I'm not really sure. But there is an index, everything from animals to like weather. There's anime on here. There's cat facts, dog facts, if you're into that. There's tons and tons of things here. This is all free and public, hopefully. And they actually have a table here telling you whether you need authorization. And it's pretty well documented, hopefully. Now, I haven't checked out all of these, so I can't guarantee how easy they are to use. But this should be a great starting point if you're feeling stuck and in a rut. Right, going back here. I actually want to start off by showing you what Postman looks like before we get into the nitty-gritty of it, and then just giving you a sense of what to expect when you send a request. All right, and then I'm actually going to send this link if anyone's curious. Here. This is our workspace. So you're going to see there's a lot of things going on here, but this is what our UI looks like. So you'll see in the top left, we have workspaces here, and workspaces are really just an organizational tool to hold things we call collections. So here we're in our workspace called API 101 Hackathons. This is a workspace that I share with a ton of different students across the world. And in here, I have assembled these 5 different collections for students that I think they would find interesting, that I think they would be really helpful to study, all that good stuff. And so we have a couple of different collections that I pulled out. Some of them are not mine. I actually forked them, which you can see from here. It says that I forked them. So like GitHub, if you're familiar with GitHub, you can actually fork other people's collections. So this is very much like if you put out in a collection, it's really cool. You can search it up here. There's tons of, let me show, there's trending APIs. They're public usually. There's WhatsApp, HubSpot, PayPal. I wonder if there's any cool ones that are like for students. You can see a lot of them are very businessy, but let's say if I clicked on this one, for example, you can see that all of these are set up for you. There's lots of documentation, and if I wanted to, I can fork it and start working with it. Yeah, so send a test message, all that good stuff. This one's a little bit more advanced. That's why I pull directly from some specific ones, like the Formula One API. That's exactly a really good beginner one. It has some documentation, but for the most part, you can read. This is a really well-designed collection. So a collection is just a folder that holds different requests, and we'll talk about requests. But for right now, you can think about a request as a specific request to get the data that you want from a specific point on a server. So here, let's say I want a list of all the drivers from Formula One, and I'm going to send this request. And here, you'll see that something pops up on the bottom. It's called a body. This is the response body. And this is coming back in a format called XML. So it's okay if you don't know how to read XML, but let's just see down here. It's really just split up by these little tables. And you'll see that Carlo Abate he was born in 1932, so I don't even know him. But yeah, this is just a long list of all names from 1, 2, 3. So there's some documentation here that I probably had to read. There's a query here, and I'll show you everything, all the details of how we can read this after this. But that is how we send a request and how we get a response. Now, let me show you something that is a little bit more relevant to what you would maybe be interested in. Here is Spotify, and this is Spotify's documentation. Now, I love to show Spotify because it has a really great documentation site. So for a lot of these, documentation is key to how good an API is, and I think this one is gold. So this one has all of the instructions of getting started. It's really, really helpful, and you can actually sort by the reference of what you need. So let's say I want a specific artist, and you'll notice that here we have the request broken down. We'll see that it's a get method, which I'll also explain. It'll tell you what you need, kind of like explaining the parameters that you need to build this request to get exactly what you want. And then you'll need the ID. So it says that you need an ID of the artist, and it'll take you to exactly what it means. And you'll find it, there's an example. It's really, really helpful to read. And then here on the right-hand side, if you have the ID of the artist that you want, you can plug it in, plug and chug, you get a response sample. And this is super, super important about how you can actually code this into your project. So now this is a lot, and this is a lot to go into before actually diving into what a request and what a response is. So let's take a step back and let's actually look at what we're looking at right now. Okay, so taking an even further step back, why do we use Postman? Why do we need it, and why is it so revolutionary? Well, there is another way to make API requests, and that is called using the curl commands. So you use this in your terminal, and it is a command line, a curl command, and is the thing on the left. So you'll see that this is just one API request and the response there. So this is not necessarily the easiest way to read things, and neither is it very collaborative. So imagine you are just a programmer, you are on a team, and you have to send over a couple of API requests that help test your endpoint on your server. Sending over a ton of them, you can't save them, by the way, unless you want to have multiple terminal windows open. It just creates a big headache, and it's very hard to read. On the right-hand side here, we have Postman. That is where we have everything laid out into a tabular format. We also have the response pop-up in a separate section so you can read it, and we have tons of other features. But the main thing is that we have collections and workspaces where we can save our requests and then just reproduce it later. We can send it to other teammates we have, and it's super, super easy to collaborate. All right, so what's really going on behind the scenes when we click send? This is a really famous analogy that we use for APIs. We're going to use the digital restaurant example. There are three characters involved in the story. There's the user, which is the client, or I did that the opposite way. The user, which is the client, the API, which is the waiter, and then the backend, which is the chef. So we have the client where we start off. It can be your browser, your application, but you're going to be doing the actions. So let's say that I go into the restaurant and I want a French onion soup. I look at the menu, which the API provides to me. The waiter comes over and he shows me the menu. I'm looking through the menu and I see that there's a French onion soup available. So I order it. The waiter takes my order and then brings it back to the chef in the back. The chef in the back gathers the ingredients, makes sure that we have the right resources for it, and then cooks it up. Once he's done with making the French onion soup, he sends it back to the waiter. The waiter confirms that it's all right and then brings it back to me out in the dining room. So that whole interaction is similar to what an API works like. So you'll notice that the API is more of the middleman in this situation, and it keeps us from really knowing what's going on in the back end. So for example, if I want the number of, I don't know what I'm thinking of, the number of, let's see, what's something that's proprietary or something like that. Let's see, like the number of followers that a certain user has, maybe. No, that's a really bad example. The number of, the number of something like that. The number of like playlists that I have open or something in Spotify. And let's assume that I want that in code. I'm not going to be able to pull that information directly from Spotify because I don't work there. I don't have the authorization. That would be super unsafe. But instead, I want to ask Spotify for it. I want them to bring me back an answer. So we have something called an API that can facilitate that transfer of data safely. So, all right. And more in a technological way of viewing it, you'll see that the client is there as the user, the API is the waiter, and the API server, who has all the resources and services, is in our backend over there. That request we make for the French onion soup, that goes through the waiter and then to the chef eventually, is called a request, and what we get back is called the response. In the case that we don't have enough ingredients for a French onion soup, the chef can actually bring back an error to the API. And that's similar to how it works in real life. All right, so we're going to dig deeper into what a request is made of and a response is made of. So a request, like we've seen before in that Formula 1 one and the Spotify request, there are a couple different components to really understand here. One, we have the methods and endpoints. So you might have heard me say endpoints a lot, but you haven't really figured out what it is quite yet, and that's totally fine. This is the bare minimum for a request. So you'll see in, let me see here. You'll see in all of these requests, you'll see it up top here. It'll say either get, post, put, patch, delete, and there's a couple different ones, and then some kind of URL thing looking here, some kind of path. This is going to be known as your endpoint, the entire thing here. And this is your method. What the endpoint is essentially is just a spot on your server where we can find the specific resources that you want. Now, this can look like a ton of different things. It can look like this. It can have a protocol, and I'll actually show you in here. Let me just open this up again. You'll see that the method we talked about before, this really follows the HTTP methods. So this is either get, post, put, patch, and delete. These are the most common ones, and they are pretty intuitive. The only one being post sends information to our server. Put and patch are used pretty synonymously for updating information, and then get and delete are pretty much the same. Now for the endpoint, this can be made up of a couple different parts. So just the protocol, the host, and then the path. So the path is the part that can be switched up a lot. So typically we'll see the same protocol and host put together, but then we'll have path and path and path. You can think of it as like folders that we're looking through to find specific things. So in Spotify, we're going through the artist folder maybe to find the specific request that we want. All right, and then we have also parameters. There are two types of parameters you have to look out for. There are query parameters, which start with the question mark. These are key value pairs. So similar to what did we look at before? Actually, and we'll just finish this. They're joined with ampersands, so that's how you can really tell whether it's a query parameter versus a path parameter. These are your general, think of them like as search keys. So this is really dependent on your documentation. So make sure you're reading your API documentation. They're all going to have different key and value pairings. So you can't just say Q equals and then expect it to bring back something. It's probably going to say bad request. But I'll show you a few different examples of query parameters. And then we also have path parameters. So this comes directly after a slash, so you can really identify that in an endpoint. And then this is usually holding a more dynamic element. So you'll see in Spotify too, this usually holds an ID value, and we saw this in Spotify. So like get artist, this is coming after a slash. This is actually called the path. So this is like we're opening the artist path, and then we're plugging in the dynamic path variable, path parameter. All right. Next, we have headers. This is more of the boring part. This is for holding metadata, which is data about data. And this is really prone to having a lot of your issues. So if you're ever stuck when making a request or something's not going right, I would recommend checking your headers. So this is another key value pairing for non-payload information, which is just a fancy way of saying non-request body information. So this can contain a couple different headers. The most popular ones that you're probably familiar with are authorization. This is just checking, do I have the right permissions to access this API? All that good stuff. Cookies, content type, what kind of request what kind of response am I expecting? Accept, and user agent, what kind of browsers are you using? These are all really technical, but if you don't know what it means, it's totally fine. This is really, really common. You can always look at Postman. That'll have a little bubble that says information on it, and you can hover over it and it'll tell you what to expect. All right, moving on to something really important, the body, which is also known as the data payload. This is optional, but it's usually supplied with post, put, or patch requests wherever you're sending over data. And this is really language agnostic, so it can be a couple different languages. Postman supports all of the different types below: form data, JSON, text, HTML, XML, files, GraphQL, all of that. And if you're not familiar with JSON, that's a really popular one and the one we use in our training. This is just a really, really lightweight way of sending over data to a server and to and from a server. And you'll see it's in key value pairings. So it's usually surrounded by curly braces. And then you'll see that each string is surrounded by, what are the quotation marks? Yeah, quotation marks. And then you have them with a colon separating them. All right, so that was a request. Now let's talk about the response, which is what happens when we send a request and it pops up on the bottom. These things, these contain three different things. One is status codes. You've probably seen all status codes, but what you didn't know is that there's actually a pattern to reading them. So the ones that you've probably seen are 200 okay, maybe, or maybe you've only seen the bad ones. Maybe you've seen 404 not found. That one's a super, super common one. If you're ever browsing a website on like a big sale day, or if you're shopping for tickets and there's like an overloaded server, sometimes you'll get something like gateway timeout, like 504 or like 503. That are your server errors. Those are your service errors. 400s are client errors. If you get a 400 bad request, there's something going wrong with your headers, your body request, or your request body, your URL, something. 401 authorized, you'll probably see if you're forgetting to add your permissions and your authorization. And 200s are your AOKs, everything's going great. If you ever want to see a light-hearted way of finding out status codes, there's also HTTP cats, which you can also look at if you ever want to see a cute little picture and then a description of actually what this means. This is actually pretty informative, so love using this. All right, so now this is the part where we're actually going to work on Postman and figure out how to make your first requests. All right, so I'm actually going to send over this link to you all. Here. Ooh, did that send? Yeah, just copy that and paste it into here. I'll actually send the actual link that you can just click here. All right, that should work. So this will lead you to another workspace called Postman Library API v2. Very long name, but basically we created an API in-house. This is going to mimic a live library, and students are using this around the world from our training course. And what this does is that it mimics a digital library where you can live add books, delete books, edit books, all the good stuff. And it goes through all the CRUD operations. So this is a really great resource to start with. All right, so our first step is that this is locked because this is essentially like a template for us. We don't have rights to edit this directly. I'm going to teach you how to make your first workspace, your first collection, and then we're going to fork this over. So if you're following along and you have Postman up and you're logged in, you can navigate over to the left-hand side over here. I have a lot more than you probably, but you can always go over here, create workspace, and you'll be led to this page. So you can always go to the blank workspace, ignore the templates for now, and just name it whatever you want. I'm going to call it Demo 111. And I'm just going to make this public for now. But you can make it whatever you want. Now you're going to have this, it's going to have like a dummy instruction, workspace description, nothing in here. Now I'm just going to leave this as is because we're actually going to fork a collection now. I lost the page, but if I open this up in another folder, let's see. Now we're back here. Let's go over and fork the collection. And we do that by just clicking on the three dots over here called View More Actions. And what this does is that it's going to create a copy in our own workspace. So I'm going to just call it My Name's Fork, and I'm going to navigate to the workspace that I just created, and that's Demo January 11th. I'm going to fork this, and it's going to automatically take us to our own workspace over here, where we can actually edit it now. All right, so let's start by reading the documentation. As with all different APIs, we should go into here, and I'll give you the TLDR. Basically, this requires an authorization on post, put, and patch, post, patch, and delete requests. So there is an API key with the variable Postman rules for the value. All right, so this is a training API, so this is a really simple authorization. Obviously, this wouldn't be as public if it wasn't. And also, what else is important here? This is a public API, so make sure that if you're using this, don't delete anyone's books that aren't yours, just out of politeness. All right, but these do get deleted on a 3-day rolling basis. All right, so let's actually explore this folder for a bit. So uncollapsing this, we have a books folder. Let's open that up, and we have get books. Let's look at that. This has a endpoint that says base URL. This is really just if you hover over it, you'll see this is a variable. This is how we call variables in Postman. And we have a URL pointing to our API base URL. So what a base URL is basically just that HTTP and the host. So this is everything before we actually go into paths. So we can attach the path after our base URL. This really reduces redundancy. All right, so this one's a get method, and you'll see there's a couple different pre-filled query parameters that we can have, but I'm not going to do anything yet. I'm just going to send it as is and see what we get. All right, so we have all right, cool. We have a 200 OK, and this is formatted pretty differently than usual. I don't know why. All right, usually it's a little bit prettier than this. Oh, awesome. Okay, this is what it should look like. All right, so you'll see this is a JSON list, a list of JSON objects, and each book is going to be each JSON object is a different book that represents it. So we have a lot of the same type of book here. Hopefully everyone can see. That's a little bit too small. Hopefully everyone can see, but you'll see the following fields are ID, title, author, genre, year published, checked out, is permanent collection, and created at. So you'll see To Kill a Mockingbird, author, and these are all just representative books. So that is the first request. All you have to do is just press send with the path books. Now let's say, okay, I want to narrow it down to genre. All I have to do, because this is something that we forked, we don't have to do any of the hard work. We can actually add in a query parameter. And if I wanted to, I can also add it up here. But here we're just asking for a fiction book. I'm going to save it, and I'm going to search again. So here we have, I didn't check to see how many books were here. Usually you can see the response size. I'm sure that went down. I'm 100% sure it went down, but I just didn't double check what it was. But that's a way you can test if that's actually working. If I did self-help or something, I don't know if there's any books like that. Here, there actually are self-help books. Now you'll see only self-help books coming up now. And you can do the same you can add 2 different ones together. I can do 2 different ones together, and it'll automatically add them up here in the request. So these are all of those. All right, so that's enough of get books. How about we add a book? Now you'll see there's no parameters in here. That's okay, but we also see that there's an authorization here. Authorization is already pre-set up for us, except now we have an API key here. Now, pretend you didn't see that. I'm going to move on and try to pretend like I didn't just see that. So we're going to go to body, and we're going to see that it's a JSON object pre-filled out for us. So now we can just update this to whatever we want. So does someone have a book that they're reading right now that I can just plug into here? Any book will do.
Get out of the yellow circle.
All right, we got one. Surrounded by Idiots is one of them that I got. Who is the author of that? And it's okay if we don't know it exactly. Maybe we'll say author and fiction, I hope. Thomas Erickson. All right, and then we're just going to keep years published because it doesn't really matter all that much. But thank you for that suggestion. I'm going to save this and I'm going to send it now. Notice that I only had to change the values of this. This is already pre-filled for us, and all we have to do is send it. Now, oh no, 401 authorized. Definitely didn't see that coming. This message is coming back as invalid or missing credentials. Make sure you add API key to the request headers with a valid value. So let's go back to authorization and see what's going on. So we have it here. What's the problem? We actually didn't update our variables. The great thing about Postman is that you can actually add variables that you can use throughout the collection. So it really reduces down redundancy. So if you remember correctly, the value here is Postman rules for the API key. So that's what we want to plug in. Postman is free. Postman does allow for a free tier. Everything you see here is something that you can do. It only gets paid when you start working in teams of more than 3. And there are some certain features that I doubt that you would have to use. We have a lot more convoluted features like collection runners, which I'll touch on, but there's a lot more advanced things. But it is free for the most part. All right, so this is our variable value. You'll notice that this is in current. Oh yeah, perfect. What is the difference between initial value and the current value? Great question. So this is a great question. So what we have, you'll see this kind of on the bottom here, use variables to reuse values and protect sensitive data. Work with the current value of a variable to prevent sharing sensitive values. So that's a little small version of it, but I'll explain it a little better. So initial values are essentially what people will see when you fork it. So for example, when we saw that first link, you'll notice that when we forked this was completely blank. If you left something in here and someone forked it, they would get your API key or they would get whatever you had, really sensitive data. But if you leave it in current value, for example, they will get a blank slate. So they would have to fill in their own variables for that. So you'll see here initial value was already filled out. So now we have that. We don't have to replace the variable. But for all sensitive things, API keys included, they should always be in current value. And it should work the same. Does that make sense? Hopefully I answered your question. But rule of thumb, sensitive data, always current value. Initial value is whatever you want public for other people to fork. All right, so now that we got that out of the way and you hover it over it and it says Postman rules in the current value, we are going to send this again. And you'll see that we have a 201 created now. So here we have the entire book as a JSON object, and you'll see that I added some actual fields that we didn't. So we actually only added, if I can bring both of them up, we only added the title, author, genre, and year published, but it added an ID, checked out, is permanent collection, and created at. That's actually part of our API that we made internally. So we can actually assume that that's going to be created for us every single time. Let's actually take the ID value here. This is now in our server. If we actually look at get books and I take away all of this stuff, let's see, I want to uncheck this, the parameters. I want to bring it back open and I want to see if our book, Surrounded by Idiots, is now number 1 in our library. I want to actually get the book by the ID now. So let's see, actually, let's go by update book by ID. No, let's go back here. So here you'll see this is pretty much the same endpoint, except now we tacked on a dynamic path variable, sorry. So we have a path variable now, and you'll see it opens up a table below. Let's just replace this with the ID that we pulled from the post request. Authorization, nothing. Headers, this is nothing new, so let's send it over. And we get a 200 OK, and we get that same exact book that we got from post. So these are going to be identical. Now, let's update something. Now, updating something requires also authorization, but since we set up the variable in our collection level, we don't have to worry about it anymore. You'll see that it's already filled out for us. So parameters, let's just go into here. Let's fill out with our updated ID of our book. And for here, let's say I want to check it out. So I'm going to fill out that, and if we look back here, I want to change this field to say true. So all you need to do is take the field that you're trying to edit and then change it to whatever value you want. Granted that it is the same data type. So that's a Boolean, so I'm going to change it to the other Boolean. And you'll see that we get the response back, and you'll actually see that it's checked out now. Now, if I wanted to do something else, like if I wanted to do year published instead, I can do that again. Just make sure it's matching, and let's do like 2011. No idea if this is true. We're just creating fake news. All right, so here you'll see that it's checked out true, and we changed the year published to 2011. So you can really edit all of your data like this using a patch. All right, so now this book has really met its lifespan. We're going to actually delete it now from our library, adding that same ID again. Look, it's all the same URL, but we're actually just making a quick change of what method we're using so it knows what to do. Authorization is up because we are deleting now. We're going to save it, and we are deleting. Now we have a 204 no content. We're going to get back nothing, but just to confirm that we actually deleted it, let's run this request before this. Remember, this is what we had before. Let's send it again. And now it says it's not found. And that is not really an error. A 404 does not mean an error in this situation. This is expected behavior. So we just ran through all of the different CRUD operations using Postman. Hopefully this was easy to follow, and hopefully you can try it out on your own too. Let's go back to the actually, let me show you what it looks like with Spotify first. So I showed you Spotify a little bit. Let's see. Now that I showed you all of this, let me just double check that there isn't another slide after this because I want to show you something really cool. Oh, no, this is the slide that I want to show you. So I was going to get into this anyways, but this doesn't stop here. So maybe for some of you who worked with APIs, that's really great. I love that you're working with APIs. I want to show you something that's going to make it even easier to work with them in your code base. So I love that this is before your hackathon, and hopefully many more hackathons to go. So this can really help you in the future. But this is a really great feature that I love using. This is the code generation snippets. So let's see. Let's say that you find an API that you have that you really love. You really want to work with it, and you set it up in Postman, and you test all the endpoints, and you're getting exactly what you want. How do you translate that into code? How do you put that into your project? Do a lot of studying and work it into and integrate into your project, whatever code base you're using, which is fine. Definitely learning a lot from there. But what if you just don't have enough time? What if you're in a hackathon, you're in a time crunch, you really just want the end product? I have the answer for you. So let's say that we want Spotify. And in here, I have an environment variable, Spotify. I would show you how to set up, but the authorization, if you can see here, is a little bit more convoluted. If you know what OAuth 2.0 is, that is the type of authorization we have, but it can be tons of different things. So you'll see there's a ton of different types. This is probably the most complicated part of setting up APIs, getting the authorization and making sure that it's completely free. So this one is completely free. I don't know what the limitations are exactly, but you're going to have to set up a ton of things here. Make sure you have the scope, the correct scope, and then you can go in and actually start using things. So that is the one barrier to entry, I will say. But after you have that, with any type of API that you want to choose, let's say that you want to, I don't know, create a playlist. And here we'll see, okay, let's do this one. So here we have a create a playlist, and we have, let's dissect this a little bit. So we have a post method. This is just essentially saying we want to send this data to the server, and the server being the endpoint is wherever the base URL is, which is api.spotify.com. We're going into the user's path, and this is actually my Spotify ID, and we're going to playlist. So if you're curious about what this looks like and where I even got this from, that's a completely fair point. Let me show you exactly where we get this from. And we'll see, not player. I keep mistaking player for users. Let's go to, it's not even here. All right, playlist here. And let's see, add items to playlist or create playlist here. This is where I got it from. You'll see that it tells you exactly what authorization scopes you need. User ID is If I put like this one, then it'll actually say, try it. Oh, it logs me out. All right. But it would tell you, it should tell you exactly what it looks like, but this is everything is requiring, just the user ID and then slash playlist. All right, hopefully it doesn't, it lets me do this since I logged out, but let's send this over and insufficient client scope. All right, so I think it did log me out, but let's just do another one where it doesn't require that scope. Let's see, browse new releases here. So browse new releases returns a lot of different things. Hopefully I can show you in a bigger format, but here you'll see it's a JSON object, very, very large, with albums, and we'll see. This one's a hard one to decipher. Down here, it'll say the artist names. Tiesto is one of them. Available markets takes up a lot of space. Let's do a different one. It can be literally anything. This one's get audiobook. This one says Frank Herbert. Let's say that you want this specific request. It's a really long endpoint and you want this in your code. That's great. Let's go over to the right-hand side and go over to this code snippet. You'll see here that this translates everything in your request that you set up into code. So you can scroll down, pick whatever language you want. I'm going to choose JavaScript fetch. And I'm actually going to just copy this and add it to my code base. And here at the very bottom, it'll make the API request. It'll set up all of your headers. It'll set up your authorization. And if you have any more query parameters, it'll add it for you. It's going to set up the get method. And then it's going to plug in that URL endpoint. Then you're going to have a response that you can deal with. And once you know what the response is, let's say you want to just scrape like the audiobook and like how many followers it has, you can deal with this data set. You can scrape it however you like, and then start working with it in your code. So that's a really great shortcut into working with APIs. All right. And if you ever want more practice with it, I mentioned that we have a full stack application now. It's called our project-based learning module, and you can start by making your own AI text summarizer app. You can start by using Hugging Face. I actually want to show you before we go, because I really think it's cool. It's a completely open source resource, and you'll see that it has image to text, text to video, image classification models, and this has a free API. It's called, I think, what is it called? Hugging Face Inference or something like that, the Inference API. So you can connect that to all of these models, and you can use that with Postman. I think we have a collection out there. All right, so that is Hugging Face. If you're curious about Postman itself and you want to start getting to know the more advanced requests and get really comfortable with it, I really, really recommend that you continue learning during our API Fundamentals certification. That really goes into more about authorization, how you can do documentation, more advanced requests basically and all. There's a lot more with Postman, and I only scrape the surface really with what APIs are. But if you ever want to learn more about this, I think this is a great space to learn. Feel free to sign up at Postman United Hacks or just scan the QR code. You have this slide deck for as long as you want, so you can also study this too. And if you do finish the certifications, please come back and apply to be a student leader. I would love to work with any of you. And I'm responsible for all of Americas in EMEA, so. And if you want any other resources, we have tons and tons out. We're really, really eager to teach students about this. So we have lots of forums. We have YouTube playlists where we actually all build things on live streams sometimes. And yeah, lots more. And if you need a community, we also have one. We have the Postman Student Community Discord, where lots of giveaways are thrown in there. We have hackathons, all that good stuff. But thank you all for listening and taking time out of your evenings or mornings for you. Hopefully you have a great hackathon, and yeah, just have a great rest of your day or night. I can also take any questions that anyone has at this time, or if you want to email me, feel free to at just lillian.nose@postman.com. Anyone have any questions? And that's totally fine if no one does. Yeah, just thank you for joining, and hopefully you all have a better understanding of APIs and Postman. Hope to see you as a student expert soon. All right. All right. No questions, then feel free to email me. Thank you all for joining. See ya. Of course, yeah. Thank you. All right. Bye.